Hello, I'm Janice Karen, Director of Policy, Technology, and Innovation at the Massachusetts Health Data Consortium, or MHDC. I run our Data Governance Collaborative, also known as the DGC. We start each of our weekly meetings with a series of industry quick updates to learn about new and proposed regulations, laws, standards, industry initiatives, and other activity. Join us for this week's updates. And if you'll go ahead and go to the first update. So ASTP put out a blog piece on APIs and information blocking. It's really about some of the barriers to API usage and it includes information blocking discussion as part of that. So one of the things that Assistant Secretary Tripathi points out is that most of the issues revolve around behavior and not technology. And that's been the case from the stuff that we've heard from, for instance, third-party app developers trying to use patient access APIs, which is the main batch of feedback that we've gotten so far, since that's the main API that's already being enforced. Some of the things that are pointed out in the blog piece are the lack of API documentation, incomplete, incorrect, or unusable documentation, just generally poor documentation when the documentation exists at all. Again, I am not surprised by that, having spent a portion of my life writing API documentation. There's a wide variation in what people do in that area, and it ranges from the completely unusable to the really helpful, just in all cases. So it's not surprising that that's happening here as well. But then he points out a variety of reasons why people are finding access to the APIs to be either prohibitively difficult or impossible. And some of the areas that have been pointed out are imposing expensive fees or pricing. That's something that we've talked about a bit, that we've definitely gotten that feedback, particularly from some smaller providers where they have access to FHIR functionality, but they've said it's too expensive and they're not turning it on because they don't want to pay for it. There've also been some reports of in order to turn on APIs, people are being required to sign contracts with terms that are problematic or that have problematic IP requirements. I was actually really interested in the IP requirements. He didn't go into any detail or elaboration on what those were, but I thought that was interesting because that's one I have not specifically heard before, and it's unclear exactly what that entails. So that's something that maybe we can get some more information about at some point. Another area that folks are running into is that they're getting that the access to the APIs or registration for use of APIs is getting delayed well beyond the point that they're allowed to delay it, and that there's unequal treatment being given to different types of users depending on relationships or some other criteria, neither of which is allowed. They're also finding that even once their apps are connected, if they're connected and meant for use within the EHR, that that the vendors are sometimes hiding access from providers or in making it difficult for them to sell to providers. And again, it wasn't clear if that was difficult to show up, making it difficult to show up in stores, or if that was making it difficult to get the payments, or what the specific issues were, but that there have been complaints in that area. Another thing that has come up is some places trying to require BAAs for patient access, which is against the rules. If the patient is comfortable with the third-party app for their data, you are required to let them access their data using that third-party app, unless the third-party app endangers your own security systems. So it doesn't matter if you don't like it. It doesn't matter if you're not comfortable with its privacy. As long as it's not endangering your own security, you have to grant access if the patient has given it authority to access data on their behalf. And then the last part that got highlighted was not, again, sort of delaying the responses or explanations of why access to the APIs was denied in cases when it was denied. So any questions about any of that before we go on to some of what they're planning to do about it? All right, then let's go on to the next page. So one of the things that they're going to be doing is continuing direct review of health IT developers and their products, and being a little bit stricter about identifying and penalizing for non-conformance in business practices. And they specifically say in the blog piece that non-conformance for business practices can result in suspension or termination of certifications, and along with that, being banned from participation in certification programs going forward. So for health IT that relies on having certification, that's a pretty big deal. They're also going to specifically provide more robust oversight and enforcement of API documentation rules. And they're also going to try to have more engagement with health IT developers about their expectations. There's actually a call starting at noon today, so it overlaps with this meeting, with health IT developers where they're going to be talking about some of these issues. So that's the first of presumably many. They're also looking to create additional educational resources, and they've supposedly improved the feedback channels. And one of the things that they've done there is they've added a dedicated section for API complaints to the feedback forum. So for those of you, ONC has a sort of a general feedback forum where you make selections and then it customizes based on the selections that you make. So they've added a pathway specifically for API complaints to that process. So you can find the blog piece at the link. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, comments about any of that? All right, then let's move on to the next update. ASTP has also released a template for real-world testing plans. It is voluntary, but the idea is that it provides a way to make sure that you include all of the information that's required in the test plan, and it organizes it for you in a way where it's easy to see what's there. So what's in the test plans? So the template also, in addition to the stuff that's required for the test plan, includes a bunch of links to helpful information about the requirements. And then there's a basic information for, name, date, serial number kind of stuff. And then you have to justify your testing approach. You have to supply a bunch of required information about each standard being tested, and a bunch of information about the metrics that you're using to show that you're addressing the applicable certification criteria and why those metrics adequately measure conformance, as well as the expected outcomes when you do testing. So when you write a testing plan, you normally write test cases and you include in those test cases what you expect the outcome to be. So this is based in line with how normal test plans work. Then they also want you to include a schedule of key testing milestones that might be first pass testing complete, bugs fixed, second round testing complete. That it may be as simple as that. Testing milestones are not something that are necessarily typical for testing plans in general, but they've asked for them here. And so I believe something that simple would be fine. And then there's a bunch of attestations. In particular, you have to attest someone with meets certain criteria that are set out, has to attest that the test plan meets all of the requirements for real-world testing plans. So you can find the template at the link. Anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments here? All right, then let's keep going. So ASTP has also put out a new draft USCDI Plus data set. It's actually a specific use case within an existing data set. USCDI Plus for Cancer clinical trial matching data set. And so they're asking for comments. This use case is supposed to help personalize clinical trials and match specific patients to the availability to trials that are looking for participants. And the comments on it are due by December 20th. You're always free to make general comments. ASTP has a set of questions in the 4 categories that are listed on the sheet. I'm not going to read them out loud. There's a handful of questions in each, and it looks pretty similar to what they've asked about past data sets that we've looked at. So nothing earth-shattering. You can find the announcement of the draft at the link, and you can also, from that page, move over to the data set itself if you're interested in taking a look at that. Any questions, thoughts, comments there? All right, let's keep going then. So NIST has put out a spreadsheet that helps people understand the differences between the cybersecurity version 1.1 of the cybersecurity framework, also colloquially known as CSF, to version 2. Version 2 was put out earlier this year. We've talked about it before in these meetings. And so what they basically have is an Excel style spreadsheet, and they include 8 or 9 different fields for each row, but the main things they do is they have a description of something in CSF version 1.1. They point out the noteworthy modifications to it. They tell you how it's identified within the new framework, and then it give you a description in the new framework. In some cases, they also have some implementation examples. I didn't see very many of them when I did a quick scan of the sheet, but there is a column for that, and there is some content there. There are also some more technical pieces that are in there, but this is the bulk of sort of if you're looking to understand it at a high level, these are the ones that matter. So you can find this spreadsheet at the link. And anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments there? All right. I believe if you'll go to the next sheet page, pause there for a moment. I hope you learned a lot from our quick updates. If you're interested in finding out more about the DGC and its other activities, email me at dgc@mahealthdata.org. That email address is also on your screen.